Hey everyone, welcome to the Engage and Educate information webinar. Delighted to speak with you this morning and share some information around how you can write the best application possible for our Engage and Educate fund. So the closing date is Friday week, so still plenty of time to start your application, or hopefully if you have started your application and you need some final tips and tricks, hopefully this information webinar will assist you to do so. Just want to do a quick check on the sound just to make sure that everything is working okay. I'm looking at my able assistant Stepanka, who's going to let me know whether the sound is working. Sounds like it is. Fantastic. So guys, we're going to take about 45 minutes. But before we dive into that, I should probably introduce who I am. My name's Owen Ryan. I'm the Social Impact Manager with Social Innovation Fund, and I am working very closely on the Engage and Educate Fund with
Gwendolyn Beeman. I'm Social Impact Associate.
So myself and Gwen are going to take you through the webinar today, and we're going to just try and afford everyone as much opportunity for questions as possible. We're just going to share the screen now, so there'll be a couple of seconds delay, but we just want to show you an agenda for what we're going to go through. So just bear with us for 10 seconds. So hopefully everyone can see on their screen now a holding slide that says Engage and Educate. Yep. So I'm just going to scroll on to the agenda. So I mentioned that it's 45 minutes. We're going to try and structure it into 3 15-minute blocks. So the first 15 minutes is going to be a lot of talking from me around just a bit of background information about the Engage and Educate Fund, what it obviously offers, and I'm going to spend a small bit of time talking about the criteria. So the criteria are central to understanding whether you're eligible or not to apply for the fund, but also assists you to answer the questions and put your best case forward in the application form. So I'm just going to give a bit of background information very quickly about the Engage and Educate Fund. So we're absolutely delighted at Social Innovation Fund Ireland to have created this fund in partnership with Mason Hayes and Kern and the Irish government, in particular the Department of Rural and Community Development via the Dormant Accounts Funds. This is a 3-year partnership. It's 450,000 in total. We're absolutely delighted to have Mason Hayes and Kern on board. Mason Hayes and Kern are a law firm that are based on Barrow Street, and they are hugely passionate about education, which is why we're absolutely delighted to work with them on this fund, because they have a vision for education that gets to all corners of Ireland, gets to all corners of the community, and I suppose uses education as a tool for empowerment. And what we mean by empowerment is every student, every individual that benefits from education, it assists them to achieve their potential. We find in, I suppose, today's world that not everyone is afforded that opportunity, and that is one of the key cornerstones of the Engage and Educate Fund. Another one of those is to also ensure that that education allows those people and empowers them to contribute to their own individual communities. And again, it's just fantastic to have Mason Hayes and Kern on board, also to have the support of the Department of Rural and Community Development. So we've already gone through year 1 in 2017. We had 4 fantastic winners, and we're very much looking forward to year 2 of the fund, which is 2018. As I mentioned, the applications will close Friday week, which is March the 16th. So before Paddy's Day, 5 p.m. on the Friday. So make sure to get your application started nice and early. And I'm just going to go through a couple of the salient points that we're looking for this year that may have differed from last year. So for any viewers that are online with us today that applied last year, there's just a couple of slight tweaks that we'd like to identify that you'll probably notice on the application form. So the first one of those is a stronger emphasis on tangible educational outcomes. So what we've said on the application form and what we said on the webpage is we've used the example of certification. So we don't mean that projects have to have QQI, but you certainly have to demonstrate what the students, what the individuals get from engaging as part of, for example, a 10-week course, so that your project actually allows the participants or the beneficiaries to attain something by the end. So there is, as you'll probably hear me say a couple of times, start and a middle and an end to the project. Much like last year, we're asking for projects that focus on people from disadvantaged socioeconomic backgrounds, people with disabilities, and people with migrant status. So I'm just going to move on now to the next slide. And I'm just going to speak a bit about, okay, so what does the fund offer? What do you get if you're lucky enough to be a recipient of the Engage&Educate Awards Fund? Same as 2017, it's a share of 150,000 euros. That 150,000 euros is broken down into two elements. And those elements are a cash grant and what we call accelerator supports. This will be shared between 4 or 5 projects. So let's use nice round numbers of 5 projects. So if it were shared out amongst 5, that's obviously 30,000 per project. And the split of that 30,000 might be 22,500 in cash, which are tied to payment triggers. So you would receive some money at the very start of your project, some money and some money towards the end of the accelerator. Then 7,500 is ring-fenced for what we call business supports or accelerator supports. So we will do a full analysis at the start to understand where you best need the support, and then use that budget to engage consultants. It might be individual workshops. It might be something to do with communications. Depending on what the need is, we will put that budget towards it. You heard me just mention the accelerator. So it's not just the cash and it's not just the supports. There's also, you get to partake in what we call our accelerator program, and that runs from July 2018 through to the end of the year in December. So you would be allowed to come together with the 3 or 4 other awardees and share learnings. We found that the peer network is huge in SIFI, and now that we're supporting up to 32 organizations, there are some very relevant projects and organizations that can support you with your own individual project or organization, and that's a huge value add. So we try and bring projects together as much as possible. Typically, you could expect 3 convenings between July and December, and there will be a number of supports on those given days. So now I'm just going to exit out of the presentation, and I'm going to go to the webpage. And what we always say to people that are starting their applications, so I'm just going to scroll up to the top. So hopefully everyone can see the Social Innovation Fund website. And you'll notice that we have clicked into open for applications. And within open for applications, you'll see me hovering over Engage&Educate Fund. So this is the place to start. This is what we say to everyone that gets in touch that are interested about the fund. Start with the web page. There's lots of very important and helpful information. You'll have heard me spoke a bit about what is Engage&Educate Fund. I'm just scrolling down the page now. What does it offer? We've spoken about. We've spoken a bit about what kind of projects we're looking for. I'm just going to center the screen now on the criteria. As you scroll down, you'll see all sorts of information around the date, what's expected of applicants. Gwen is going to speak to the bottom half of that, but I'm just going to go back up to the criteria. I'm just going to speak for a couple of minutes around the importance of understanding and seeing your project in these criteria. So you'll notice that there are 6 criteria, and these are standard criteria that Social Innovation Fund apply to all of our funds. And we ask you to read these really carefully because you need to see your project in them. And what you'll notice as well, and this is kind of touching on what Gwen is going to speak about, is the language that we use. So we talk about a critical social issue. We talk about being innovative in an Irish context. We talk about scale, we talk about testing, and we talk about impact. So that language is consistently used across the application form. But what does it actually mean? I'm going to speak a little bit about a specific example, and Gwen is going to give you a very useful guide that she has prepared to allow you to see how it's applicable. Looking at the bottom half of the page, you'll notice that these are kind of additional criteria that are specific to Engage and Educate. So we've spoken a bit about certification, and I'll use a specific example to speak a bit more about that. And we've also spoken about the target groups, so the focuses, in terms of disadvantaged socioeconomic background, disability, and migrant backgrounds. We're also looking for projects with a strong evidence base. So how do you know that it works? Have you tested it? What have you proved? How do you know that if you receive 37,500 euros from Social Innovation Fund, that you can apply that in the best possible way to the target group, be it migrants, and that you know that your project delivers results. We also say that it's really, really important for you to have research, for you to have an evaluation component. You'll notice in the application form that there are opportunities for you to include this. We're not asking you to write out all of the research, but we're certainly asking you to include what are those high-level, most important points that you have taken out of that research and how you've applied them to your project. And by all means, please include links. If we want to do more reading, we will certainly use those for the research. And you notice that the last one is, if you've got a numeracy or literacy component, we'd love to hear from projects that have that component. So I'm just going to click back into the presentation, and I'm going to speak about a previous awardee. There are actually multiple awardees. The project is called Icicle. So Icicle weren't recipients of Engage and Educate, but they are recipients of our education fund. And they're a very, very good example of what I just spoke about. They're very strong on an evidence base. So back in 2009 and 2010, they trialed their solution. Let's go back a step. What is their solution? Icicle is a blended learning model, so online and offline, that supports early school leavers to attain educational outcomes. Sorry, I'm just looking at. Okay. So it looks like, sorry guys, we're just going to pause for a second just to make sure that I'm looking at the camera correctly. So just bear with us 1 second. We're just going to come out of screen sharing. So just doing a double check to see that I'm looking at the camera correctly and that people can hear what I'm saying. Looks like it's all okay. Great. So we're just going to go back into screen share. Actually, no, we're going to hold on the screen, and I'm going to speak a bit about Icicle. So Icicle, as we said, is a blended learning model, online and offline, an online platform, as well as offline support that supports early school leavers. So there's 3,300 of these early school leavers every single year that drop out of school before receiving junior certificate. So that leads to all sorts of problems later in life, and there's lots of research that demonstrates that. So what Icicle have done is they have provided an alternative pathway to education for these early school leavers. So the online platform allows these early school leavers to learn on their own time, at home, but also access blended learning centres across the country if they do want to then participate in group activities or learn together as a group. So an example of this would be a beneficiary or a student that wants to avail of the services will present themselves to Icicle. We talked about the start, middle, and end. Icicle will create a baseline for those students, will take down the salient information that's really, really important, and tailor a learning plan that allows them to, within a year or whatever pace they have, maybe it's 2 years, to achieve QQI3. But it's not just about achieving QQI3, it's about empowering that student to feel that they can learn. So maybe they're suffering from mental health issues, maybe they're suffering from bullying in the classroom. It allows them to re-access education. And ultimately, maybe they do end up back in the classroom and go on to receive leaving certification. But when I speak about the blended learning model, what Icicle do that's quite innovative is that they provide not only a tutor that brings them through the course content, but also a mentor that keeps an eye on how that student is progressing. So it's, I suppose it's not just looking at the educational side of things, but also looking at how that student is performing, how they're getting on themselves, ensuring that they're learning in the right way. Maybe they need to tailor their program accordingly. And what's hugely innovative, I suppose, about Icicle is that the blend between the mentor and the tutor allows them to change what they're doing. Maybe it's adding a module, maybe it's learning in a different way, dependent on the needs of that student, to support them in the best way possible to achieving an educational outcome, in this instance QQI3, but also, really importantly, increasing their confidence, increasing their sense of well-being, allowing them to access a student environment through the blended learning centres, but also the option of doing that via the comfort of their own home on their laptop or desktop computer. So the key things to hear there, I suppose, are that it was based on, that there was research that supported the solution, that there was an evidence base that proved that it worked. And then over the last 6 to 7 years, they've supported on average 60 students with an 85% success rate in terms of achieving QQI3 or above accreditation. So you'll hear me have spoken about certification. That's an example of that. Again, that's not a criteria. You don't have to have QQI accreditation, but that is one of the examples of which Icicle provide that. So look, I've spoken for about 15 minutes now. I'm going to just take a pause, and I'm going to offer anyone that has any questions based on the content that I've spoken about in the last 15 minutes. So I'm just going to allow time for 2 questions. So one of the common questions that we've been asked over the last few weeks is all around, what do we mean by testing? So what we mean by testing is a bit around what we spoke about on for Icicle. So what are you measuring? What for that? So for that individual student, let's call him John. How are you tracking the progress of John's achievement towards, in this instance, well, John completes a number of modules, and each module has a number of exercises that need to be completed, and that's all tracked centrally by Icicle. I suppose previously, when they were in the pilot phase, they would have trialed a number of different models, and they would have learned, and they would have evaluated, and they would have iterated. So in 2009 and 2010, what Icicle looked like is very different to what it looks like now. But I suppose the key thing to understand is that they were always measuring. They were always looking at baselining what they were going to hope to do at the very beginning, and setting targets and measuring how they achieve those at the very end of the year, and then taking the evaluation learnings and applying them to the following year. So testing is kind of an all-encompassing word that just ensures that you're measuring how you're progressing for any project that you have, and how is that impacting the beneficiary or the student in this case, to ensure that you are providing the best possible support to that student. So we've just got one question from Ruth. So Ruth has asked, is this open for new social enterprises just set up with research done and evidence base from other countries on success? So very good question, Ruth. What we would say is it is open. It's great that there's research done that supports your project, and it's even better that there's an evidence base from international examples that proves, I suppose, in this instance, that your model would work. What I would say is to include that as best as you possibly can in the application form. I suppose it's to be cognizant of the fact as well that there are projects out there that have been I suppose, carrying out their project for a number of years, but certainly you're not precluded from applying. And I would use the application form to best address how you would take that international evidence base and apply it to the project that you hope to set up in Ireland. So look, I'm just going to hold it there, and we're just going to go back into the screen share just for a moment. Back into the agenda, and I'm going to stop talking and hand over to Gwen. So what Gwen is going to do is she's going to speak a bit about the application form itself. So the application form has a number of terms. You've heard me speak about evidence base. You've heard me speak about beneficiaries. You've heard me speak about projects. You've heard me speak about solutions. What does that all mean? We want to make sure that you have a full understanding before you start your application form. We want to, I suppose, support you to put your best foot forward and put in the best application form. And Gwen is going to go through some really good, useful guides that she's prepared to help you do that. Over to you, Gwen.
Hi. Okay. So I'm going to go over, as we were just showing you, a little glossary of terms that we've made, and then a case study, and then just go into the actual application. So everything can be found from the webpage, the Engage&Educate webpage, which again I'm gonna share here. So if you go down to the bottom, you'll find under frequently asked questions, can you explain what you mean by output, model, impact, testing, etc. So here we have a couple of little resources that have been made up. If you click on that first one, which is the handy one-page glossary of terms, you'll be taken here. So this is essentially, it's language that's used kind of by everybody, but everybody tends to use it a little bit differently, as Owen was saying. This is the way that we mean it. I think, as Owen was also saying, we really try to be consistent in everything that we write and in our application forms. So, you know, what do we mean by beneficiaries? This is the people your project is directly helping. What do we mean by impact? This is the positive change which can be attributed to your project. What do we mean by project versus organization? This is the solution you're pitching to us, including the structure and the model of it. So yeah, we've got down there solution, testing, vision. I'm just conscious of wanting to lip read there. I wonder if I can have both.
So, so the reason we're jumping between the guides and you seeing us is because we have someone with us that requires us needs to lip read what we're saying. So we're trying to jump between the two. So please just be a bit patient.
Yeah, sorry about that. So yeah, I'm just basically going through those. Now I'm gonna go ahead and share the screen again and just go over a little bit of this other resource, which is the case study. So bear with me now. All right, so again, from the webpage, down in frequently asked questions, in the same areas, you get your one-page glossary of terms. There's also a case study, which is here, and click here to see examples of how these terms can be applied. So there's that project youth employment, a case study. So this is a made-up project, which is the mission is to provide disadvantaged young people with work experience and vocational training with local employers. So here we have kind of practical application of how to use the terms in the way that we mean them. Goal, objective, output, outcome, impact. We have what we mean when we say research, what we mean when we're talking about evidence-based, which actually is the question that Owen was just asked. The answer here in this case study is, while their model has not yet been used in Ireland, Project Youth Employment has found research showing that the model has been effective in New Zealand and Argentina. So just an example of how we are fine with that. Here's the model, and actually, if you're back in the glossary of terms, we've got that in there. So design or plan of project, including means and method. So when we're in here, what we mean by that, or how we like to see it, is we want to understand how your project actually works. So if we don't know anything about it, you're always completely all over it. You know it inside and out. But this is the way to make us understand in your application form, and I'll show you where that is in just a minute. Here again, we have what we mean by the beneficiaries. In this case, it's the young people gaining work experience and vocational training through the project. What we mean when we talk about scalability and replicability, this is one of our main criteria points, that your project needs to be scalable and replicable, and you need to have some interest in having it scale or replicate. So that's pretty important to pay attention to before you think about starting an application. So I'm just going to go back there. Yeah, I'm just going to go back into, I'm going to go into the application form now. So that, again, is on the Engage&Educate webpage. It's just here at the top. Click here to commence your Engage&Educate Fund application form. So that's going to take you over here. Oops, I'm logged out. I'm logged in. I meant to be logged out. So you're gonna create a login here, and if you have filled out an application for one of our other funds, you still have to create a new login. It can be with the same email and the same password, but this is an entirely new, what's called a portal. So you'll just need to do a new login, and once you're in there, you fill out the profile section, and then you go down here and go into the application. If you want to print the application, go to the little I there, click on it, and you can print. So that'll print or make it a PDF for you. If you want to work on your application, you go into that little writing guy there, click in. So there's the application form. I know some of you have already started. Basic information up at the top. Here's where we are trying to get a sense of what you do and the problem you're trying to solve. Down here we have the video. Actually, if you're back on the web page, down again in the same bottom where the glossary of terms is, back up here. We have, how do I upload a video link to my application, and what is expected of the video. Here we have a little guide, and here we have a sample video. We are not looking for anything professional with the video. We just want to get a sense of who you are, what the problem is you're trying to solve, and what your passion is for it and what you're doing. So here, the step-by-step guide, that's essentially, it's question 6 there. That is the model. So again, we want to see literally a step-by-step guide of how your project works. And you can refer back to the case study under model to see what we mean by that. Innovation, testing. There's the question around certification for this particular fund. And we have, again, measured outputs and outcomes. Those are answered in the glossary of terms and examples shown in the case study. scaling, growing, investment readiness. So yeah, this is. If you obviously you're probably not doing this all at once, so you can go down to the bottom to save the draft before you're ready to turn it in on the 16th, on the 16th of March. So that's it for me. I think I might hand it back.
Just finish with the tips.
Oh yeah, I lied. I'm gonna I'm gonna just go back in here, and so these are just some tips from having read a couple hundred applications at this point. Some things that we've noticed are recurring problems that we think could be avoided from the outset pretty easily. So read all the information on the webpage before you start. Answering the questions with clear, concise language. Keeping the criteria in mind when answering the question. So if that's printing it out and having it beside you, or sitting with someone else that works on your project with you and going over it together to see if you meet it, we certainly don't want you to, we don't want to discourage anybody, but we certainly don't want anybody wasting their time either, if they're not meeting basic criteria. Avoid copy pasting answers. That's kind of a big one. It's pretty obvious when it's done, and it just doesn't tend to reflect the question asked, which makes it pretty confusing for the reviewer, and it takes some points off for you, essentially. Use research or pilot results to explain why your solution is needed. That's, again, kind of gone over in the case study if you need some help with figuring out what exactly that means. And as well in the Glossary of Terms, use facts and figures, same as above. Use examples to further explain your answers. That can mean various things. Like if your project's been up and running for a while, sometimes that's using a specific example of one of your beneficiaries that you've worked with, that can work really well. So you cite your sources when using outside research. If you're making some kind of a claim, like a percentage of Irish people this or that, we want to see where it's coming from, that it's not made up. So that's okay. Now that's actually basically it for me. And we might go back to our faces here.
Any questions lined up? Just a quick question from Ruth. She's looking for where's the link to the Glossary of Terms again. So Ruth, it is you can find it very quickly by scrolling to the bottom of the webpage for Engage&Educate. If you go to frequently asked questions, you'll find in frequently asked questions there is a click here button that talks about Glossary of Terms. So it's very easy to find there. Just have another question there from Susan Whelan. What email can I use to request this PowerPoint presentation to be emailed to me? Very good question. So Susan, if you just want to send us an email at hello@socialinnovation.ie, we'd be happy to share the presentation with you, and also happy to share it with anyone else who'd like a copy. Got another question from Dermot O'Callaghan. So Dermot has asked, is it possible for two organizations to apply in partnership? The nature of the work requires partnership to give scale and best impact. Perhaps it's best to go with a lead partner that applies. I think you've answered your question there, Dermot. I mean, it's absolutely fine if there are two organizations that are applying in partnership. What we would ask and what we would stress is that you need to specify a lead organization. So we always like to deal with one person that we know is leading that project and that is accountable for it. So we appreciate that there are partnerships and there are certain parts of the project that are reliant on another organization, but ultimately what we find works best is if we work through one point of contact. and that point of contact is the person that would take part in the accelerator. And obviously, it's entirely fine if you want to bring a representative from that partner organization to the accelerator days, but ultimately it'll be one person that will be accountable for the delivery of the project, or the milestones that are set between ourselves and your project. So thank you to Sapanka, who's just put in a little question there. So guys, I'm just conscious that we've got about 7 or 8 minutes left. If there are any other questions from the floor. We do have a couple of questions that have been asked that we would consider frequently asked questions. So maybe I'll share one of those. So one of the things that we're asked, that's at the bottom of the web page. You'll see it in eligible projects. What's eligible, what's not eligible. Something that's not eligible is capital expenditure. So what we mean by capital expenditure might be, I want to deliver a project to Mayo, Galway, and Sligo, but I want to buy a van to transport all of my equipment. That's unfortunately an example of capital expenditure, and that is something that we don't fund. So what we want to focus on is supporting your project. So supporting the nuts and bolts, supporting how you measure your impact, supporting you as a leader, supporting how you communicate the amazing aspects of your project so that it helps you scale and grow that project across all corners of Ireland. So one of our core beliefs at Social Innovation Fund is we're brilliant at coming up with lots of different ideas and lots of different projects, but we're not very good at scaling them across the country. So what's brilliant in Belmullet should be transferable to Skibbereen and Cork, should be transferable to Wicklow Town. So we want to support the project in the best possible means. The project itself, the organizational structure, the model of the project, maybe it's paying for an evaluation. Those are the kind of things that are in. Unfortunately, capital expenditure, fitting out a kitchen, 50 iPads, a van are unfortunately not included as being allowable as cash grant spent. So I've got a question from Anne. Is there a maximum size of organization that can apply? I mean in financial terms, maximum income / turnover. We like to focus on the project, Anne. So you'll notice from the application form that it is very project specific. We also ask in the financial section of the application form to provide us with financial information associated with the project and not specifically the organization. So I suppose in summary, it doesn't really matter what size the organization is, but what we ask for is project information as much as possible. And just a question from Isabel. Do projects have to be completed in 2018? Very good question, Isabel. Short answer is no, they don't. What we would ask is that the projects, so we're conscious that it's education, and we're conscious that starting in July is when students are on holidays. So what we did last year was we used July and August for planning with the projects. So I'll use an example. Pieta House were one of the winners last year, and they delivered a program called Resilience Academy in secondary schools. So obviously they can't deliver anything in July and August, but what they could do was refine their model to ensure that all of their marketing and communications materials were in place, to ensure that they'd be up and running in September and reach as many schools as possible. But again, to go back to the original question, they delivered to a number of schools in the first term of 2018, so between September and December, and they're currently using the cash grant to deliver to other schools in this term as well. I might just leave it open if there's time for maybe one last question. one or two? Might turn to Gwen. Gwen, is there, as you mentioned, you've read probably 220 applications in the last 8 months. Is there anything that I've missed in terms of important information for applicants to be aware of?
Important information.
Eligibility?
Eligibility, we could go over eligibility. So that again is on the fund page, as is everything else. So at the very bottom there, on top of terms and conditions, maybe I'll just share the screen again real fast. Okay. All right. So down there on top of terms and condition, projects that are not eligible, projects seeking funds for scholarships, projects seeking funding for capital items, as Owen touched on there, research projects, party political projects, projects that screen beneficiaries in or out by faith or religious denomination, projects where the main impact is outside of Ireland, projects that are an idea only and that have not started yet. And then in terms of applicants, must be over 18. This is kind of an important one, actually. Applications must come from an entity that has a not-for-profit legal form. So we do get a lot of questions on that. Particularly, we get a lot of for-profit organizations. They're technically for-profit. That's their legal form is they are a company limited by shares, and they have a section that they are operating as a not-for-profit. For us, this makes no difference. They're still, if they're operating under an organization that is for-profit, then we can't fund them. So that's just part of our remit. We get government funding, and that's just the only way we're able to do things. So it's not personal. Our staff and family members are excluded from applying, and Mason, Hayes & Curran staff directors and family members are excluded from applying. Now, clients of Mason, Hayes & Curran are not excluded from applying. They just want it to be flagged. So there is a point in your application where it asks if you are a client. Don't be scared by that. It's okay. We just want it to be flagged for transparency's sake.
Okay.
So yeah, that's eligibility.
Great. Well, guys, I think that brings us nicely up to 11:45. So we promised it would be 45 minutes, and it looks like we're going to hit that. We should probably just close with, if you do have any questions, please email us, hello@socialinnovation.ie. No question is, too stupid, or just ask, and we'll be sure to get back to you as quickly as we possibly can. Don't leave it too late. So the applications do take a small bit of time. There is probably some information, maybe in the financial section, that requires you to ask other people. So, really, I wouldn't be starting applications any later than the start of next week. So that allows you to put in the best application that you possibly can.
Can I jump in there quickly as well? While we do try to be available, just on that point of trying to get your applications done a bit early, we do get a lot of panicked emails and phone calls toward the last couple of days, and sometimes we just can't get to all of them. So, you just want to be aware of that. We do the best we can, and we absolutely want to be here for you, but sometimes it's just not possible. So do try to make sure that you are getting most of it done pretty early.
Great. So guys, it just that leaves us with just a final reminder. So 5 p.m. March the 16th, which is a Friday, so that's Friday week, is the closing time to get your applications in. So please don't leave it to the last minute. If you've got any questions, ask them this week or the start of next week, and really, really best of luck with the applications. We're very, very excited to receive them, and all the best. Wish you all the best with your application.
Thanks.